Hi, welcome back to Stewman Rides. We're here at Chuckwalla Valley Raceway again, and we're going to talk about using different approaches for different types of corners. I had an interesting experience this past Thursday. I was out here coaching all day, riding with a few different riders, and one of the riders that I was coaching had very good technique. And what I mean by that is typically when you go to riding school or get some coaching, well, the first thing they work on is trying to get you to go deeper into a corner before you actually turn in, right? So a lot of newer riders make the mistake of turning in too early for a lot of corners, and what that does is get you to the apex a little too early, and then you run wide coming off the corner, and that normally doesn't work very well for a lot of corners, right? Most corners you want to go in pretty deep, turn the bike pretty hard, hit a late apex, and then drive out of that corner. So that works. It's a good rule of thumb, right? For the majority of corners, that kind of technique works very, very well. However, it's interesting here at Chuckwalla, there's a lot of corners where that technique really might not be the best. That approach might not be the best for particular corners out here. So I wanted to talk about why you might want to take a different approach to some corners as opposed to using that classic approach of going in real deep, turning late apexing, and then driving out. So I'm going to use two examples here at Chuckwalla. This is turn 2 behind me. This time we're going in the counterclockwise direction this weekend at Chuck. So this is one of the last corners on the track actually that leads on to the front straightaway. There's a little kink after it, but for the most part, it's a fairly straightforward 90-degree left-hand corner, right? And so as you can see on the approach, you got a nice straight shot going into it. There is a corner before it, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's a fairly straightforward 90-degree corner with a straight leading into it and a straight right after it, right? So in this corner, it's perfect for that classic technique. You want to go in real deep. In this case, you're turning almost by the end of that curbing there, right? You're going way into the corner before you actually turn the bike. You turn the bike very hard, and then you try to do a late apex and gas the bike really hard onto that front straightaway. So for that corner, the classic technique works very, very well. One of the downsides of that classic technique of going in really deep before you turn the bike is you have to turn the bike pretty hard, right? So you have to have some confidence to be able to turn the bike very, very aggressively to make that kind of line work. To do that, you have to slow the bike down some, right? You don't want to go into that corner, or it's difficult. I guess if you could, it'd be really nice, but it's difficult to go into a corner like that super, super fast with a lot of entry speed and then turn the bike really aggressively, get that late apex and power out, right? So typically, if you're going really fast, you got to get the bike slowed down some before you make that aggressive turn in. So in this case, behind me, it's not so bad, right? What we're doing is we're setting our entry speed early. We're getting our entry speed pretty much set by the time we're ready to turn the bike. And then we turn the bike aggressively, get on the throttle early, power out of the corner. So it works pretty well for that corner behind me. So that doesn't necessarily work as well for other corners here at Chuckwalla. And the corner I'm actually in right now is a good example of that. So this is turn 3. Going in the normal direction, coming back, it's one of the last corners again that leads on to the front straight, precedes the corner we were just talking about. But in this corner, it's a more sweeping corner, number one. It's a more open radius, it's not so tight. Number two, there's a very short straight between this corner and the one we were just talking about, turn 2. And you want to make sure that you set up turn 2 very well, because that's going to lead on to that front straight. The entry to this corner is very open, and you have a long straightaway that leads into it, right? So when you're approaching this corner, you're approaching it at a very high rate of speed. It's very open on the entry. Oh. Just dogs hunting apexes. So the approach to this corner, you have a fairly long straightaway leading into it. So I'll give you a look at that, right? So we have a pretty long straightaway leading into this corner, and then the entry to this corner is quite open. So we'll turn around and give you a look at that. So here's the entry to turn 3, right? Okay, so now I'm standing at about the point where I would turn in for turn 3. You can see there's a very long straight behind me. You have a high rate of speed. That corner coming onto the straight is pretty fast. You can drive down that straightaway pretty hard. And then as you can see, the entry to this corner is rather gradual, right? It's a very open radius. You can see that they have a cone placed there for the apex. That cone's actually not in the best spot, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in this particular corner, we're approaching it at a very high rate of speed. It has a very open entry. It's not very tight. The straightaway after it is not very long, and we want to get out wide on that straightaway to set up that turn that leads on to the front straight that we were talking about earlier in the video. So in this corner, right, if you were going to use that classic approach to the corner, you might go to the end of the curbing, maybe even a little bit past it before you turn in to get to that apex cone, right, to have a nice late apex. So you'd go way in there, right, very deep, turn the bike very aggressively, hit an apex near that cone, which is fairly late, and that's going to send you onto that little short straight, right? So you could drive out of it. That would be the classic approach to this corner. So the problem with that is, if you do that, if you go that deep into the corner, you're going to have to slow the bike down significantly to get it turned to get to that apex, right? So if you go that deep into the corner before you turn it, you're going to have to slow the bike rather dramatically. You're going to have to turn the bike very aggressively. You're going to get to a late apex, which is going to send you shallow off of that corner, right? Which, if it was a long straightaway, that's what you would want. You want to come off the corner tight so you can drive it all the way to the outside edge of the track. But in this case, it's not really a very long straightaway. So I'm going to suggest a different approach to this corner. So what I would recommend, actually, rather than going that deep into the corner, slowing the bike so dramatically up before you actually turn it, is I'm going to turn in just a little bit earlier, right? And instead of slowing the bike, because I'm turning gradually, I can enter the corner with more entry speed, right? So I don't have to turn the bike really aggressively here. I'm okay because the entry to this corner is rather gradual. And I'm going to suggest hitting a little bit earlier apex. And what that will do is actually push you out a little bit wide coming out of this corner, which is fine because that's going to set you up better for that corner that leads onto the front straight. So rather than going in and slowing the bike dramatically, what I'm going to do is carry a lot of entry speed in here and allow the bike to slow as I enter the corner, right? So I can roll off, I can brake, trail brake maybe, turn the bike in a little bit slower, ride the brakes in a little bit longer, set my speed a little bit deeper into this corner. I'm going to apex a little bit early intentionally. That's going to push me out a little bit wider, and that's going to set me up better for the corner that follows. I'm not too worried about driving super hard out of this corner. I'm more concerned about trying to carry a lot of entry speed going in. So it's just contrasting two different types of corners and two different approaches that you would want to use. I think it's a really good idea to consider each corner individually, right? Understand what that corner has to offer you. What comes before it? What comes after it? How's the corner shaped? Is it an increasing radius? Is it decreasing radius? Is the entry to the corner gradual, or is it a very sharp 90-degree corner or a hairpin? So once you kind of analyze each corner, then you have to come up with how you want to approach that corner. What's your plan? Do you want to try and maximize the entry speed? Are you trying to maximize the exit of that corner? Are you trying to do both? There's a lot of options here. You have the option to turn the bike in a little bit earlier. You have the option to go in deeper and turn the bike late. You can turn the bike quickly, you can turn the bike slowly, you can get all your braking done before the corner, you can brake into the corner, and you want to choose which one of those techniques makes the most sense for each corner out there. So that's an idea. I just wanted to contrast that classic line versus something that you might do a little bit different from that and why you might choose that. We'll take a look at the track map and talk about some of the other corners on this racetrack that have that same, where you have similar options, right? You may want to do it the more classic way, you may want to do something a little bit different. So let's take a look at the track map. So let's take a look at the track map for Chuckwalla, and we'll talk about the approach that we might use for each of the corners. We're going to talk about the track traveling in the counterclockwise direction, so the opposite direction from the way the track is numbered. So let's start going down the front straight. We're going to go through turn 17, which is really just a little kink to the right. We're going to head into turn 16, and we're going to try and draw a straight line from the front straight through past the apex of turn 17 to a first apex in turn 16, and then we're going to let the bike run out a little bit wide. Because we're kind of trying to draw that straight line going in, that allows us to carry quite a bit of entry speed, and we can brake pretty deep into that corner. We're going to trail brake in there very deep. We're going to set our speed about halfway into the corner, and we're not going to need to turn it very aggressively, so we can use the brakes a little bit harder because we have the bike straight up and down. So a little bit opposite from your classic, run it in, wait real long and turn it in real sharp at the beginning of the corner. We're going to try and straighten out the beginning of that corner. The exit at turn 16, we're going to hit a late apex and drive onto that little short straight. Turn 15, as you can see, is a pretty straightforward corner, constant radius, pretty open, less than 90 degrees, so it's quite fast. You do brake a little bit going in there, but it's more of a classic approach. You run the bike in pretty deep before you turn it, set your entry speed fairly early, and hit a later apex, sending you on to that little short straight. Turn 14, another very classic kind of corner. You run it in pretty deep, turn in very late, hit a late apex to drive onto the straight that leads into turn 13, which is the bowl. So turn 13, another double apex corner. You turn it in fairly early, hit an early apex, which sends you out a little bit wide through the middle of the bowl, and then you come back for a late apex on the exit. Turn 12, another kind of classic corner. You run it in there fairly deep, turn it fairly late. You stay a little bit tight on the exit of 12 to better set up turn 11. Turn 11, again, is a very late apex because you're trying to drive onto that long back straight. Heading down the hill, down the back straight into turn 10, you're going to turn in fairly late for turn 10. It's a pretty classic kind of corner. Late apex sets you up a little bit better for turn 9. Turn 9 is off camber at the top of a hill. You're going to late apex that to set up a straight drive through turn 8. Turn 8 is really just a kink. If you set it up properly, you can go quite fast through there and drive very hard onto that straightaway that follows. Turn 7 is very much an exception kind of corner where we're going to turn in early. We're going to trail brake it going in there. We're going to hit a very early apex, which is going to send us out wide, which will set us up better for turn 6. Turn 6, more classic kind of corner where you late apex and drive onto the short straight. So turn 7 and 6 are very much connected. There's not really a straightaway in between those two. So we're turning in early for turn 7 to force us to run a little bit wide, which sets us up better for turn 6. So a little short straight leading into turn 5. Turn 5 again, we're going to turn in a little bit early. We're going to apex a little bit early, which sends us out a little wide again, which again sets us up better for the next corner, turn 4.
Turn 4 is a late apex driving onto a straightaway. So a more classic kind of approach there. And then turn 3 and turn 2 are the ones that we just talked about in the video. So I won't go into detail on those because I think we covered that already. So that's a quick lap around Chuckwalla and talking about the approach that you might use for each of the corners on this particular racetrack.
All right, so that's Chuckwalla Valley Raceway. That's a couple different approaches that you can use, different techniques that you can use for different types of corners. Again, the whole point of this video was to try and give you some options, right? I think when you're first starting out, it's a really good idea to have the ability to go deep into the corner, turn the bike hard, back on the gas early. That stuff works in the majority of corners on most racetracks. The interesting thing is, like I said, here at Chuckwalla Valley Racetrack, it's not necessarily like most racetracks, and we have a lot of exceptions here, and there's a lot of corners here where you might want to do something just a little bit different. Hopefully, you can use some of the things that we talked about on your favorite racetrack. Something you may recognize corners on your racetrack that are shaped similarly. And that's actually a good way to go about learning new racetracks, right? Compare the corners that you know to the corners on the new racetrack, and you can kind of figure out your approach or your plan for that new track. So again, thank you very much for watching Stu-Man Rides. I hope you liked the video. I hope it helps you ride a little bit better, a little bit faster. If it does, give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps me very much. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching Stu-Man Rides. I hope to see you back here very soon with another video.